So why do we even need LangChain? What in fact is LangChain? If you've ever or seen a video on YouTube which is talking about building generative AI applications using, say, openAI API, then one of the things that you might have seen referenced a lot is LangChain, and lots of code snippets from LangChain being used. But why are we using them? I mean, it is important to understand that, because otherwise, when we try and build our own applications, we won't really understand where and when do we need to use LangChain. Hi, this is Shelly, and this is my YouTube channel, AI Economics. I'm a professor of artificial intelligence, and I teach AI concepts to business management students, decoded with a business lens. If you're interested in this content, please do consider subscribing. Now to understanding what is LangChain. So what is LangChain? LangChain is a framework designed to simplify the development of applications that use large language models, such as OpenAI's GPT model at the back end. So basically, what does it do? It basically provides you the building blocks to integrate these language models with external data sources. That's your company's database, for example, or maybe something on the internet. It provides memory systems for storing responses. You obviously don't want your customer interactions being stored on OpenAI servers. And lastly, user defined. You can design your own specific workflow for your particular chatbot. So those are basically at a very high level what LangChain does. Why do we need it? Because first of all, there are various complexities that are associated with building generative AI applications, and also with the way the API works. Currently, the OpenAI API if you use that, or for example, you use an open source model, you still have to manage things like a memory. You have to set up a memory for managing and storing long conversations. Second thing, you have to figure out how to connect to external data sources, whether it is documents, databases, or APIs. Thirdly, how do you handle complex workflows which involve a lot of control sequences with a lot of if-else conditions and decision making? LangChain essentially helps you simplify all these things and enables you to focus purely on the logic of your application. So LangChain is actually a big help for people who are non-coders, because it means that it provides a lot of heavy lifting it does a lot of the heavy lifting in the development of a generative AI application. Let's just deep dive a little more into what are the benefits that LangChain provides and why do we need it. First thing is, let's think about a scenario. What if there's only an OpenAI API? Can we still make a generative AI application? All right. So you can certainly build a chatbot or an assistant, but managing it is going to be difficult. The first thing is with regard to control flows. With only the OpenAI API, there is no sort of way or inherent structure in the large language model process to manage conversational flow. You would need to sort of write custom logic at every step. For example, if you wanted a loop that retries different solutions until the user's problem is solved, you would have to code that loop explicitly. And then you would have to manage the conditions and responses at every stage. The LLM is not going to be able to do that, at least not as yet. You'd also have to remember which part of the conversation the user is in. For example, if we are in a troubleshooting step or are we in a feedback step. All this can get messy, especially as your conversation becomes longer. So you can see there's a lot of coding that is required here, and this is going to require a big team of software developers. The second thing is memory management. The OpenAI API doesn't have a built-in memory to retain information between interactions. The prompt window does. So when you normally use a chat window, there is a short-term memory built into it, which is known as context. But the API as of now doesn't. This means if your user asked something previously, the API wouldn't remember it unless you explicitly resent relevant information into each prompt. For short-term memory, like remembering what a user just said, you'd need to pass the entire conversation history at each API call, which would add tokens and make the whole process expensive. For more long-term memory, that is, remembering users' preferences across sessions, you'd need to set up your own storage, for example, database, and manage when to retrieve and what to retrieve. Continuing with what if there's only OpenAI API. The third thing is state management and orchestration. So we always hear of LangChain and orchestration. Essentially, complex interactions like conditional responses, branching patterns, or fallback scenarios require substantial coding to keep track of the conversation state. For example, if the assistant should handle a different task based on the user's response, you'd have to write various if-else statements and possibly multi-step functions to handle these transitions. So this entire thing needs to be orchestrated, and that is exactly what LangChain does. So at a high level, what does LangChain do? First and foremost, there is no short-term memory. Therefore, in each interaction, every query that you key in is isolated with no knowledge retention across queries. Therefore, even within a particular session, there is no short-term memory to remember what is being said. Related to that is, because there is no short-term memory, how do you resolve complex iterative queries? Because it's difficult to have feedback loops. There is no mechanism to track the status or progress of the query. For example, a user might need an iterative help like check if this approach solves the issue or try another approach. The ability to handle complex multi-step tasks or iterative queries relies on short-term memory because the assistant must remember the current state of the conversation and then must also remember what has been tried and whether it has worked to move forward logically. So without short-term memory, the assistant cannot keep track of intermediate steps or the user's feedback during the loop. However, apart from that, the loops also need to be set up and programmed for. Thirdly, there is no long-term memory. That is, for example, if across sessions, that is to say, if the user had already had a previous session and then comes back to this session, there is no way that what happened, information that was provided in that earlier session would be remembered in this particular session. There is no long-term memory across sessions. And there is therefore a need which you would require to do to set up a database for actually storing those responses, for providing personalization. So this impacts personalization. Also, there is no built-in tool support for tool integration. So if, for example, you need to access an external database, or you need to access the internet for something, or a web scraping tool, for example, all this needs to be orchestrated, and that again is a problem. Follow-up queries can also lose context because there are no control flows for complex queries. So in short, what LangChain provides is built-in memory, control flows for complex queries, LLM agents for accessing tools and orchestrating the entire process of accessing a tool, and orchestrated sequences for actually managing the entire end-to-end sequence. So, for applications requiring multiple APIs or tools like web scraping or accessing databases or handling complex logic, LangChain has intelligence agents that can intelligently call these tools based on user input. For example, if you want an assistant that both answers questions and pulls data from external APIs, LangChain agents can manage when to call the OpenAI API versus the external tool without you having to write external extensive code. So LangChain is basically like a workflow and memory manager on top of OpenAI's API. It automates and abstracts from the complexities of conversation flows, memory, and tool integration. So you can focus more on the high level stuff, which is really important, which is developing a generative AI application that slots right in and automates your business and enhances customer engagement, and not get bogged down by all these huge implementation details such as the memory database, such as control sequences and feedback loops, etc. So without LangChain, you would need to build all these aspects individually. And it is for this reason that many large corporates, for example, have faced challenges from the perspective of actually integrating generative AI applications into their processes. LangChain is a very powerful solution for that. Possibly it does not fit all use cases, but it is certainly for if you're a person looking to pilot out a generative AI solution for a particular application. This is one. Having a good knowledge of LangChain is absolute, and when to use it, for what is it used, is absolutely critical. I hope you like this content. And if you're interested in more such videos, I will be doing follow up videos on the LangChain and then later on providing guided tutorials. So please do consider subscribing to my channel, AI Economics, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.